Welcome to this week's InDesign training. So there's a couple things that we're going to go over this week. One is importing multiple artboards from an Illustrator document. So say this is our InDesign document, and I've created some artwork in Illustrator, but it's multiple artboards. And how do I import multiple artboards? Well, it's actually really easy. So when you go to File, Place, and you select the document that you want to place, which is the InDesign Illustrator file, you click Show Import Options when you're importing, and you click Open. And here you have a window that will let you, decide if you want to import all of, the artboards, a range of the artboards, options in terms of cropping, if you want to keep a transparent background, show preview, etc. What about layers? So this is where you can make some of your decisions. Then it will load up all of those artboards onto your cursor. And then you can just click, and you can either place within a frame or just place it on your document. And you can see the way that I selected it, it's a transparent background, it's just fit to the size of my artwork. And now my artwork is here and it's linked. And if I go to the links panel, I can see what's linked, what page it's on, some information about that. I can open up this pop-out menu. I can relink it. I can edit original, which brings up the Illustrator file. So those are some useful things to actually use. So next, let's talk a little bit about text. So, like I've mentioned previously, I want you to add text to your document, and I want you to put in sample text. So go to Lorem Ipsum, you can just Google Lorem Ipsum and put some sample text into your document, sample text for headers, etc. Again, like I mentioned in the previous menu, you can, if your bounding box is super big, the frame is really big, you can go into your menu up here, right? And you can fit frame to content. You also have a lot of other options up in the contextual menu, and I encourage you to play around with that. So when it comes to images and whatever you're actually placing, you can change the way that text is wrapping around those images, and that's something we'll talk about on a future date, but that's something to stay aware of. You can also change the way things are sort of aligned and fit, and etc. And just like in Illustrator, you have a lot of control with how the text is actually sort of shown. So you can change the font, you can change, the weight, you can change the text size, the leading, whether it's capitals or lower caps, etc. You can change, the kerning and the tracking, the vertical scale, the baseline shift, all these things you can change, and I encourage you to really customize your font. All right? So you can actually apply stroke and fill and effects to any object that you have in InDesign. So for example, with the header right here, you can do effects via the effects panel, or you can go to object effects. You can add a drop shadow, and you can sort of play around with the way that this looks. The drop shadow is a nice way to add depth and dimensionality to your document. Remember to make sure you click the preview, click OK. Here in the effects menu, you'll see what effect is being used. And you can also have some additional options there. Now, like I said, here you can add any stroke. So for example, if I want to add a stroke to the background, you got to make sure that you actually have some sort of color going on. So now I've made a beautiful box that has a stroke of 7-point green and a beautiful background of blue. Now I can go over later with how to actually make there some space between the stroke and the text. So say, for example, I add a stroke and a color, and we'll go over later how to add swatches because we have specific colors that we're working with. You can also add effects to this. And I encourage you to play around with what kind of effects you can do. You can add a gradient feather. We can change the sort of gradient stops. There's a lot you can do. Remember to click preview. You can always remove whatever sort of effects you use. Remember, keep it simple. But that's a couple things that are good to know how to use.